A very good morning to you all and a warm welcome to Deepwater Baptist Church Online. This morning you join me in the kitchen, and the reason is because I've been watching Paul Hollywood on TV, so I've been inspired to try a bit of baking this morning. So we're going to try and make a loaf of bread. Now I've done this a few times before, but I need to still check the recipe because I'm never quite sure of the quantities. So I've got Mr. Hollywood's book here, and according to Mr. Hollywood, all you need to make a loaf of bread is a few basic ingredients. So you need 500 grams of flour. This is strong bread flour, and I've already measured this out. We need some oil, which I've got in this jug here. We need some yeast and some salt and some water. And apparently that's all we need, just these 5 basic ingredients to make a wonderful loaf of bread. Or at least that's the plan, to make a beautiful loaf of bread. We'll see how I get on. So let's have a go. So what we're going to do first of all is start with the flour. So I already know this is 500 grams, so we're going to pour this flour straight into the bowl here. And we're going to take one of these packets of yeast. That on one side, and then we're going to take some salt and put the salt on the other side. And then we just need a drizzle of oil over all this. And then all we need now is to add some water into that. So we're going to start mixing this and then add some water as well. Okay, I think we're about there, so that doesn't look too bad. Now it's time for the fun bit, which is kneading it. So we're just going to try and do that. Okay, and there we are. So this now needs to prove for a little while. So we're just going to put it into the bowl, and we're going to cover that so as it can prove for a couple of hours. Always amazes me when I'm making bread that just a few simple ingredients is all it takes to make a loaf. I mean, these are very basic ingredients, aren't they, that most people have in their cupboards. A bit of flour, a bit of oil. Everyone's got those, surely. But do you remember at the start of lockdown, when you couldn't get bread in the supermarket, and actually you couldn't get flour either? The shelves where the flour normally is were completely empty, and you couldn't get oil either, or yeast for that matter. These basic ingredients were very hard to come by in the supermarket. Thankfully that situation has changed now, and the supermarket shelves are pretty much back to normal levels. But for many families in Hayes, they simply can't afford to put food on the table. So there's a lot of families here in Hayes that simply can't afford these basic ingredients. So the supermarket shelves may be full again, but people's cupboards still remain empty. A few of us are trying to do what we can to help families in need here in Hayes through the amazing work of the Hayes Community Food Bank. So I appeal to you again that if you can possibly make a donation to that food bank, if you can buy an extra bag of food when you go shopping. We really need your help, and we can put it to good use straight away. We're taking donations every Friday at our new home at Hayes Free Church between 1:30 and 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. So if you've got a bag of shopping that you'd like to bring up to donate to the food bank, bring it up to us between 1:30 and 3 p.m. on Friday, and we'll be able to use it straight away. That food goes out to families in need on a Friday afternoon, so it really can make a huge difference. And if you're in need of a donation from the food bank, if you are in need of a food parcel from us, then you can get in touch with us on our email address at hayescommunityfoodbank@gmail.com, and that address is there on the screen. Please do get in touch if you need our help. Some people have really struggled to put food on the table during these difficult times. And it reminds me of a story in the Bible of a widow that Elijah met, and she didn't have very much to live on at all and was struggling to provide for her family. There was a famine in the land. There had been no rain for a very long time, and because there was no rain, everything stopped growing. All the crops around, nothing grew. And the story starts with a very bad king called Ahab and a prophet of God named Elijah. Now Elijah told Ahab that because he was such a bad king, he had been so disobedient to God, then there would be no rain in the land and no crops for a long time. And that's exactly what happened. Everything stopped growing because there was no rain. And Ahab was furious with Elijah, and he wanted Elijah dead. So Elijah had to run for his life and go into hiding. But there was a famine in the land, there was a drought and no rain, so no food. So what was Elijah going to do for food? Well, God provided for Elijah in an amazing way when he was in a ravine. God provided food sent by ravens. How amazing is that? I mean, we've been watching the birds feeding in the garden. They don't seem too keen on sharing their food, and yet we're told that the ravens provided meat and bread every day for Elijah to eat. Incredible, isn't it, the way God provided for Elijah? But then, before too long, the river in the ravine where Elijah was dried up because there was no rain. So Elijah had to move on. And God told Elijah to go to a place called Zarephath. It's more or less where modern day Lebanon is today. And there God told Elijah that he would see a widow that God had instructed to provide for him. So Elijah goes to Zarephath, and sure enough, when he gets to the city gate, he sees a widow who is there collecting sticks. So Elijah thinks, well, this must be the widow that God has told me about. So Elijah asks the widow to get him some water from the well. And as she's doing that, he calls to her and says, "Could you also get me something to eat?" Well, this poor widow is a bit like some of our families are in Hayes at the moment. She had nothing in her cupboards. In fact, all she had was a little flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. And the widow explained to Elijah, she said, "Look, all I have is a little flour and a little oil. I'm just going to make one last meal." She intended to make a loaf of bread for herself and her son, and then she expected that after that she would have no more food and they would die. So she explains this to Elijah, and Elijah sets this widow a mighty challenge. Elijah says to her that if she put her trust in God and provided this meal for him, then God would provide for her, and that the flour and the oil would not run out until the drought was over and there was food in the land again. So that's exactly what the widow did. She set about making a loaf of bread for Elijah. there we are, the finished loaf. Perhaps not the best loaf I've ever baked, but I think it will do for Elijah's lunch. But what about the poor widow and her son? This was all they had to live on. So what are they going to eat now? Well, just as Elijah had promised, when the widow looked in her jar, she had a little flour in her jar, and she had a little oil in her jug. So she was able to make a loaf of bread for herself and her son. And the amazing thing is, the next morning when the widow came down, she had a little flour in her jar and a little oil in her jug. And God provided for her needs day by day, just like Elijah had said he would. The Bible says that if we put our trust and faith in God, then he will provide for our needs too, just as he provided for this widow. I've been a Christian for many years, and I've always known that to be true. I've not always been well off. There have been times of real struggle, but looking back, when I've needed it, God has always provided just what I've needed for that time. And he'll do the same for you. So today, if you have plenty, then remember to thank God for his blessings on you. And I urge you to be generous to others as God has been generous to you. If you're struggling at the moment, then be encouraged by this widow's story. Put your trust in God and he will provide for you day by day, just as he provided for this widow. And finally, I just want to encourage you that this widow didn't have much, but her faith in God shone through even more powerfully because she trusted God day by day. So I pray for you that God will provide for what you need today, and that you'll know God's blessing and his care for you day by day. May God bless you all. Amen.